Good evening and welcome. On a historic day in Australia, a unanimous decision by all 7 judges in the highest court in the land has stunned the nation. Cardinal George Pell winning his appeal to quash child sex charges against him.
Not since 1988 have we seen a landmark judgment as divisive as this. That of Lindy Chamberlain, who was found guilty, jailed, released and finally cleared of murdering her daughter Rosaria on a camping trip to Uluru in August 1980.
In that case, Justice took numerous appeals to the federal and high courts and 4 inquests before Lindy was exonerated. But to this day, Australia is still divided over what happened to Rosaria 40 years ago. Today's High Court verdict is sure to be just as polarising.
And it comes on a day when Australia is at war with a pandemic that's left the nation paralysed. Soon we will have the very latest coronavirus developments.
We'll look at the countries giving us hope our restrictions will soon be lifted, and the Health Minister joins us on the new outbreak modelling. But first, let's go to Chanel Vella, who's outside the Melbourne Monastery where Cardinal George Pell is tonight. Chanel, good evening to you. What is next for George Pell?
Good evening. Well, as you mentioned, he is spending his first night as a free man here in this monastery. It took him around 46 minutes to get here from Barwon Prison, the place he has called home for the last 404 days. What we know is that he probably won't want to call Victoria home for the foreseeable future. We understand that he did want to travel back to Italy, but of course with the COVID-19 outbreak, that's not possible right now. We also hear that perhaps he wanted to go to the United States, also not possible. There are some rumours circulating, however, that a jet is being prepped to perhaps take him interstate. Yeah,
Chanel, there was a brief statement today. Do you think he will give an interview of any kind or make a more public statement?
Look, I think he absolutely will. We know that he has always protested his innocence from the very start, from the moment those 2 Victorian police officers travelled to Rome and they sat down and they interviewed him. He always said that all these allegations were rubbish, and he's been outspoken about that. We heard that earlier today perhaps he did want to address the media, but it's not safe with social distancing at the moment. But we do understand that he will perhaps give an in-depth interview, more likely to be with someone that has supported him every step of the way.
You have followed this as closely as anyone that I know, and sitting through all the various legal manoeuvring on this over such a long time. What is the broader reaction that you can gauge from all of this and your reaction to this decision?
Yeah, look, it's been a very long time. It's been a 3-year legal battle, and we've been sitting in the courtroom every single time watching him. And I guess there's always debate between court reporters about what will happen, and those discussions have been, happening non-stop between us. And I guess there was a different feeling, is what I will say this time, is the last few times we've thought that perhaps he wouldn't get out, but this time it just felt different. And we were all nervous, really, at 10 o'clock this morning, waiting for a tweet of all things to reveal George Pell's fate.
Yeah. OK, Chanel Vella, thank you for that.
Well, let's bring in David Garbally, one of Melbourne's most respected QCs. David, thank you for joining the latest. Were you surprised by this decision today?
No, I wasn't surprised. I've been firmly of the view right through this case that the evidence was not strong enough to maintain a conviction. And I'm not surprised at all.
OK, and the fact that it went to the High Court, why was this decision so unusual?
Well, it's extremely unusual because it's had to go through all the steps that it has, and it's very unusual for the High Court to look at a jury verdict and then to look at the verdict or the decisions of the Supreme Court on factual matters and make a decision in relation to the facts, which is what they've done today, which is highly unusual.
And then stepping through and analysing the evidence in the way that they did, can you think of another case where the High Court judges have had to do that?
No, I can't think of another case. It's extremely rare. It's probably the first time, I think, in my legal career. But it's pleasing to see that the High Court are prepared to do that they are prepared to descend and analyse the evidence to see whether or not a conviction can be maintained. And I think it says a lot for our judicial system, and everybody should have faith in our system to think that our High Court judges are prepared not just to consider the law, but to also look at the facts upon which the law is to be applied.
OK, so do you think this then today restores faith in the system? Because I was thinking you could almost look at it from two angles. You could also then be worried if it's damaged our system at all.
No, it certainly hasn't damaged our system. I think what it's done is to reinforce the fact that we have a strong High Court and that our legal system does work, and ultimately, if it falls down for some reason or another on the way through, that our High Court judges are prepared to consider facts and not just legal argument in order to make sure that verdicts are safe and sound. And I think that's a very good thing. I think it's a big plus for our legal system today.
May I just ask you too, you mentioned evidence earlier on. From a legal perspective, what did you make of it?
Well, I've always been of the view that the evidence has been somewhat questionable as to whether or not a conviction could be maintained. And I've always been concerned about that. And I'm just pleased at the end that ultimately the High Court has determined that the evidence wasn't sufficient to maintain a conviction. I mean, that's got nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of anyone. What it has to do with the sufficiency and the weight of the evidence upon which a court comes to the conclusion that a person is guilty or not guilty. And in this instance, I'm pleased to think that the High Court is prepared to look at the evidence, analyse it and come to the conclusion that it has.
Certainly a significant day for our legal institutions. David Garbally, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
And the Pope has tonight responded for the first time following that High Court decision. Christopher Lamb, Vatican correspondent for The Tablet, joins us via Skype now. Now, Christopher, the Pope has tweeted, seemingly comparing Pell's experience to the persecution of Jesus. What do you make of that?
Well, the Pope made a general remark this morning about those who have suffered unjust sentences. So it wasn't specifically aimed at Cardinal Pell. Well, of course, many people had that in mind. I think it reflects a view within the Vatican that many had, that they felt there was some doubt over the allegations of the charges that were brought against Cardinal Pell. And many inside the Holy See felt that there were questions over the evidence. And Pope Francis has, although Cardinal Pell was a different theological position, Pope Francis has always been very supportive to Cardinal Pell and allowed him to take a leave of absence to return to Australia to defend himself. And I think this is a reflection of the Vatican's own scepticism over the charges against the Cardinal.
We just heard from our reporter then that she believed that in Pell's ranks he was saying that he wanted to get back to Italy, not that he can right now because of the bans, but do you think he would return to those senior positions? He was chief financial officer at one stage and an advisor to the Pope. Is he likely to return to his former duties?
No, he's not, because he no longer holds the position of prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy. He's no longer on the Pope's Advisory Council of Cardinals. He has stepped aside from all official positions, and I think that's probably the right thing to have happened given the circumstances. I think that the Church will have to make a very careful assessment about Cardinal Pell's future. Obviously, he has been acquitted, or the convictions have been quashed in this case, but there are other allegations that have been made against him, and there are also the wider case of the management of abuse cases. The Vatican and the Church globally has been grappling with sex abuse for many, many years, and the view in the Church is that the cover-up or mismanagement of cases is equally as serious as the crimes themselves. And so when the Royal Commission's findings over the Cardinal come forward, I think there will be a careful reading of them, an assessment of that, and whether or not there can be a kind of triumphant return to Rome, to me, seems unlikely, given the wider case involving the Cardinal.
We appreciate your time from Rome tonight. Chris Lamb, thank you very much for that.
Well, now to the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has unveiled modelling used to predict how the virus could spread across Australia. The theoretical data was used to guide their decisions surrounding social distancing measures and other restrictions.
Now, this is what was originally predicted, a scenario that could have seen many more infections, many more deaths, and our intensive care units overflowing. The good news is that hasn't eventuated, and we're already flattening the curve, in stark contrast with the countries used to collect this data. And with isolation and social distancing restrictions working, the risk of exhausting ICU beds is currently low. For more on the modelling and our social restrictions, we're joined by the Federal Health Minister, Greg Hunt, in Canberra. Greg, thanks so much for joining the latest again. Now, first up, a few short yes-no questions, and I know these may vary in some states, but generally, so we're clear about Easter. First one, can we put the kids in the car and go for a day trip to visit friends and family?
No, we do not want that to happen. Right around the country, that's the very clear view, and I'm sorry about that. Easter's a time where we want people to get together, ring them on the telephone, call them on FaceTime, contact them over the internet, be kind to them, but not a family visiting time, I'm sorry.
What about going to a holiday home, say staying with grandma, grandpa, for example, that might be up the coast or in the country?
Well, if it's visiting other members of the family or staying with other people, the answer remains no. On travel, we're discouraging travel, but different states have different rules, and so there may be no legal prohibition.
All right, can we have a barbecue at our home with anyone who doesn't already live in that home?
No. So that's a one-word answer. Again, yep. I'm sorry about that. These are the things, though, that are keeping Australians safe, and that's the reason. All the different measures have helped us to bring the infection rate down so as now we can begin to see a way through this. There's a lot more to go, but all of these difficult things that Australians are doing magnificently are literally saving lives.
So then can I ask you, the modelling that we were seeing today is showing that we're suppressing the outbreak better than a lot of other countries. How long will these measures need to stay in place? Are we looking at any time soon to be able to relax them?
So our best guidance is that we're looking at a 6-month course for the virus. So the arc of the virus is, we believe, 6 months in Australia. That remains the case. It might be a little bit less, it might be a little bit more. We are going to have to settle in and be patient, do things in a way we've never done. I've seen businesses adapting, schools, families, so many people being really creative. But so long as we continue to support each other, then that will mean the human side of this virus isn't neglected. It's difficult, but people are rising magnificently, and that's what's setting us apart from other countries in Europe and North America and Asia, where we've seen such agony and heartbreak. And what that modelling showed is we've avoided what could have seen between 3 and 20 million Australians contract the virus. Now we're at a very different phase, and we have a very different future, and I'm feeling more optimistic, and I've been cautious on statements like that, but we're making progress, but only if we stay the course, not just over Easter, but over the coming weeks and months. OK,
more optimistic is good. We'll take that. But, Minister, just a small area of concern, and briefly, the figure that jumped out today, the more than 500 incidents of community transition across the country. Are you worried about that? This is where we don't know where it's come from and how it's spread.
Yes, this is our largest worry. So community transmission is where we don't know the original source of somebody's infection. And so those are the cases that most worry us, because it means that somewhere within a community there's somebody who doesn't even realise they have the virus. They may think they've got a runny nose or a cold, and they're the cases which we have to succeed in mopping up, in chasing down, in tracing. They're the things which are really going to get us through, and that's why we have to keep our distance, because there are cases out there which are unknown to the person who has it, and if they keep their distance, then they won't transmit it. And literally, each of us can save a life by distancing or make a decision which could lead to tragic outcomes.
All right, Health Minister Greg Hunt, thank you.
Thank you. You know, I just want to say to Australians, you're doing a great job. We've got a very different future to other countries, and if we keep at it, as hard as it is, we're going to get through this.
Now let's turn our attention to what happens when a lockdown is lifted. Many countries having success with their curve are beginning to ease social restrictions.
It's a risky strategy, as Singapore has just discovered after initial success in controlling infection rates. It was forced back into lockdown this week. Angela Cox has been looking at what's happening right around the world now.
Austria has been the first of the bloc in Europe to announce it's relaxing the rules.
The Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz said today that the coronavirus lockdown measures could start being eased as of next week.
After a month in lockdown, the country will, from next week, allow small shops to reopen, followed by larger stores and then restaurants, hotels and schools. That's because the rate of infections has slowed. Also doing well, China, where the 2-month lockdown of Wuhan, the epicentre of the outbreak, will end tomorrow, allowing residents to leave the city for the first time. China's very strict lockdown, ordered early in the piece, seems to be working, but the country isn't out of the woods. When thousands of sightseers took advantage of their newfound freedom and flocked to a popular tourist spot, authorities quickly moved in to shut it down. South Korea, the world's 12th largest economy, never had a formal lockdown, but has done well by identifying and isolating cases early and actively tracing their contacts. New cases are falling, but bars and karaoke rooms will still be closed for another 2 weeks. Singapore was praised for its early containment of the virus, but today it's gone into total lockdown for a month after a spike in new cases from returning residents. A month ago, it had less than 100 cases, but has just recorded more than 1,300 cases and 6 deaths. Denmark is also claiming success, lifting restrictions on schools and business next week. But gatherings of more than 10 people will still be banned, and border controls will remain in place, which may be just as well, because neighbouring Sweden, with no lockdown, has experienced a sharp increase in deaths, from 401 to 477 in a single day. That's far higher than any of the other Scandinavian countries. Bars and restaurants in the country are still open for business.
They are keeping the distance and they are very not sitting so close to each other.
The theory is that it will slow infections to a manageable pace.
This long-term thing on the low scale that we do in Sweden is much more sustainable and would not cause these enormous differences in the amount of cases getting into healthcare.
But many health experts in Sweden are pleading for a change to the relaxed approach to the pandemic, which seems to have badly backfired. And finally to New Zealand, which has been in a level 4 lockdown for nearly 2 weeks, with no one allowed to leave home except for getting essential supplies or exercise.
These decisions will place the most significant restrictions on New Zealanders' movements in modern history.
A strategy that seems to have paid off, with officials cautiously talking about easing back to level 3, which would still mean public venues closed and a ban on large gatherings.
Let's bring in Tim McLean, who's an Australian man living on the outskirts of Wuhan, where, as we've heard, the lockdown is being lifted at midnight. Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Now, people there, I think is it nearby Hubei province, have been confined to their houses for 9 weeks. How are you feeling about the lockdown being lifted tonight?
Good, thanks. We're on the outskirts of Wuhan. Ezhou is the city I live in, and we had ours partially lifted about 8 days ago now. They've just started opening small shops, started with the public transport a few days, just buses, no trains or anything like that. But yeah, it was great to get out. It was great for it to open up a little bit and get us out of lockdown.
I bet it was. It's a long time in lockdown. Any tentative or any hesitations that the restrictions could lead to a second outbreak? Any hesitations, I guess, in lifting the restrictions?
Well, we're all being very cautious. We still have to have masks on and take all appropriate measures that the government put in place earlier. They're being very cautious about how we go about it. They don't want a spike. They've had a few cases come back into the country from returning residents. But yeah, we pretty well haven't had any deaths for the last week or so.
Tim, how hard's it been in lockdown?
Yeah, it took a little bit of getting used to, but once we all sort of got used to it and everybody sort of did the right thing, it was drawn out in the process, but now I look back at the time, it sort of went really quickly. I was cleaning in the city to keep myself busy and doing a little bit for the community here, so I was fortunate enough to be able to get outside a bit and you know, keep sort of exercised.
Bit of relief. Oh, well, it must be a relief getting out of it as well. Hey, Tim, good on you. Thanks for joining the latest tonight.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Now, just as we were speaking there, Mel and I have both been handed a statement out of the Vatican tonight. It's breaking news. This is the first formal statement we have from the Vatican in relation to George Pell's decision or conviction being quashed. So I'll read to you here. The Holy See, which has always expressed confidence in the Australian Judicial Authority, welcomes the High Court's unanimous decision concerning Cardinal George Pell, acquitting him of the accusations of abuse of minors and overturning his sentence.
Entrusting his case to the court's justice, Cardinal Pell has always maintained his innocence and has waited for the truth to be ascertained. And then it says, at the same time, the Holy See reaffirms its commitment to preventing and pursuing all cases of abuse against minors. So, fairly brief statement, but yes, exactly.
Breaking news statement from the Vatican.
So significant. All right.
All right, still to come, power bills surge with so many working at home. The savvy tricks you need to know to keep those costs down.
And on that note, our isolation tax hacks, what you can and can't claim.
This was big news today too. Year 12 students reassured they won't have to repeat the school year, no Year 13. But what does that mean for the final exams?
And we'll go live to London to check on Boris Johnson's condition. That is next on the latest from 7 News. Power consumption is doubling in many households thanks to more people working and schooling from home.
Let's bring in our Network Finance Editor, Gemma Acton now. Gem, good evening to you. So how can people make sure that their power bills do not go through the roof at the moment?
Well, Michael, usually most workers would be out of the house from about 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. That's a long time where lights are off, devices aren't charging, and nobody is using hot water or heating. Now, of course, during this crisis, energy is in use round the clock, causing consumption to even double in some households. The biggest drains of household power and gas include computers, lighting, aircon, heating, hot water, printers, scanners and phone chargers. So how do you lower your usage? Well, make sure you have your devices in sleep mode so they can power down when not in use. Add layers to stay warm and close your doors rather than switching on a heater. Use LED globes and turn off unnecessary lights. Check your fridge is set to no colder than 4 or 5 degrees and use the microwave instead of a stove or oven. Finally, don't run your dishwasher until it is full.
Very good tips. What are the energy companies, Gemma, doing to help?
Well, Mel, the government requires retailers to offer hardship and hibernation policies to help consumers. These have now been extended to include those affected by the coronavirus crisis. The Australian Energy Regulator has also outlined additional actions expected of energy retailers, including offering all households and small businesses which identify as being in financial stress a payment plan or hardship arrangement, not disconnecting customers before 31st of July and potentially beyond, not referring any customer to a debt collection agency until at least that same date, and waiving any disconnection, reconnection or contract break fees for small businesses which have gone into hibernation.
Meantime, though, Gemma, the fuel prices, they're plummeting. How long can we expect them to go?
Well, Michael, fuel prices have fallen dramatically. The national average price of unleaded petrol fell by 7.1 cents to a 31-month low of 120.5 cents a litre last week. The average family is now saving around $54 a month at the petrol pump compared to just 3 months ago. Motorists can expect petrol prices to keep falling across most of the country going into the Easter weekend, with the only exception being, unfortunately, Perth, where motorists could see prices rise this week.
All right, Gemma, all good advice. Thank you. Well, weeks of doubt for millions of school students has come to an end with Education Ministers meeting to make a decision regarding the rest of the school year. The main concern, making sure those in their final year of school can complete their secondary education before 2021. Education Minister Dan Tehan had a strong message to all school leavers today.
There will be no Year 13. There will be no maths repeating. Every student will get an ATAR certificate for 2020 so they can go to university, so they can go to vocational education, so they can go on to employment next year. That was the strongly endorsed position of all state and territory education ministers.
Let's bring in Dr. Kevin Donnelly now, the Senior Research Fellow at the Australian Catholic University. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Now, what did you make of Dan Tehan's announcement today?
Well, I think it's very important that we get the Year 12 exams for ATAR out of the way this year. It wouldn't really be fair to have students and teachers working over the Christmas break, and universities really need to work over that time to actually decide who, in terms of the students that get ATARs, will get into the university places they choose. So we have to get it done this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this Year 13, it pushing into next year. Do you see any reason why the government should consider deferring the final year to next year?
No, and I mean, it's a bit of a moving target, if you like. I mean, on the expectation that schools get back to some kind of normality in a couple of months, then I think we're okay. The fact is, you can have the exams maybe 4 or 5 weeks later in the year, and that might get into late November, early December. But if we can get through this period of the pandemic, then I think it's better to have it all sorted. I mean, teachers and students have had a very long year. They're looking forward to that Christmas break. Yeah. And the challenge will be, if the year is shortened because of the pandemic, how they actually arrive at the ATAR scores, which they use then for university entrance.
Just briefly on the universities, what's the impact on them for next year if this year gets stretched out in the final year of school?
I mean, that's a very good question. Obviously, universities are tertiary sector. They rely on students being well prepared during year 11 and 12, and that normally happens. I mean, the reality, though, this year is that if the year is truncated, as you said, universities might have to look at doing more bridging courses, more resources, more teaching time into first-year students to ensure that they're up to speed, as it were. So it will be difficult for universities, but hopefully with the resources, and government might have to step in here, then I think it can be done.
What's your best read? Because it's very hard to get a clear idea of this, and I know that's understandable at the moment, but do you think schools will go back after Easter, or will they sit out another full term out of school? There seems to be a mixed message between what the Prime Minister would like and what some of the states and territories are actually doing.
It's a complex issue. The reality is that the federal government doesn't have any control over school education. That is the preserve of the states. So it's a bit of there's tension there, obviously. It's compounded by the fact that the different states have different times for when schools begin and go back after Easter. So it's a complex question, but I think the pressure will be on, certainly for essential workers, that schools are open so that they can get their kids to school and get on with the work they need to be doing to address the pandemic.
All right, Dr. Kevin Donnelly, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Still to come. We're flattening the curve. Have we gone too far, though? We ask if our social distancing measures are a bit too strict.
The tax breaks you're entitled to if you're working from home.
And Boris Johnson's in intensive care. We'll go live to London for an update on his condition. That's all coming up next on the latest from 7 News.
The Australian response to the coronavirus has been swift and effective, with tight social restrictions curbing new case numbers while turning everyday life into a shadow of what it once was. But has our determination to stop the spread become lost in a battle for political point scoring? Let's bring in infectious diseases physician, Professor Peter Collignon from Australian National University. Professor, thanks for your time this evening. You say that we hit our peak of cases around March 25, yet restrictions continue to get tighter. Have the laws in New South Wales and Victoria, do you think, gone too far?
Well, I think some of the laws have. For instance, I can't see why sitting on a park bench, for instance, when you're keeping your distance from others, how either you're going to give an infection to others or how people are going to give it to you. And the same as if you're driving in your car. But the good news about our epidemic curve, it is not only flattened, it's gone down. It peaked about March the 25th. And what that means is what we did in the 5 days to 10 days before that made all the difference. Now, there is the issue about, well, are there community infections that may actually cause the curve to go up again? Well, the answer is yes. But all the data so far suggests that they're not going out of control. But we need to actually say what is sustainable, not only for 3 months, but till the end of winter, meaning September, October. So we've got to tailor our response to the risk that's here. And we are not like New York. We are not like London. They had 2 months probably of uncontrolled and unrecognised community spread. We haven't had that, and we're unlikely to get it because we've got relatively a lot of testing and we need more. Mm-hmm. And also, more importantly, we've done lots of things that interfere with the transmission of this virus. All appear to have worked.
Yeah. Do you think it's about mindset, though? I mean, I feel like a lot of these laws are quite strict and people aren't necessarily adhering to all of them. So if we go a little bit further and those that don't do it all, is that, I guess it's about how we think and changing our attitudes?
Well, I think it is about changing our attitudes, and a lot of things we do now we're going to have to do for at least 6 months and maybe even 2 years if a vaccine doesn't appear or is that long to appear. And that is things like washing your hands, keeping away from mothers who are sick or sniffle or anything like that, keeping a 2 metre distance, stopping large groups getting together, particularly inside, and that actually means clubs, pubs, etc. But we're going to have to do this long term, and it'll only work. You can't do this by laws. You've got to do it because the vast majority of people think this is the right thing. Mm-hmm. For instance, the way you avoid crowds is because if you go there and you say, I don't want to go there because I can't keep 2 metres away from it, so I won't go in, because not only is that endangering others, it's endangering me. So people get that. And we need to realise on the sensibility and, the proper sense of most of the population that they will do what they realise is not only good for them, but good for everybody else.
Hopefully they do. Professor Colin Young, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has spent his first night in an ICU ward in London as he struggles to recover from COVID-19. Let's bring in our 7 News Europe correspondent Sarah Greenhalgh, who's with us now right outside the hospital there. Sarah, what is the latest on his condition?
Good evening, Michael. Well, no official update as such, but we are hearing that Boris Johnson is receiving oxygen. He is not, however, on a ventilator at this stage. He has now been in ICU for about 17 hours. When he was moved there, it was said that he was conscious at the time, but as we know with this virus, it is just so incredibly unpredictable and things move so quickly, as everyone experienced yesterday. The PM had been trying to run the country from his hospital bed until his condition rapidly deteriorated in the afternoon and he was moved into intensive care. He is in the hands of some of the world's best doctors. St Thomas's Hospital here is said to be one of the most respected, one of the oldest in the UK, and it was also one of the first to start treating COVID-19 patients at the beginning of this outbreak. And doctors here are really stressing the point that the fact the Prime Minister is in ICU means he absolutely needs to be there. They don't have beds to spare at the moment with the health system under such enormous pressure. For now, he has handed over or allocated all decision-making powers to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab. That includes the day-to-day handling of this pandemic. But things aren't great for the government behind the scenes. The Health Secretary has only just recovered from coronavirus, and now it has just been revealed that another senior minister, Michael Gove, is self-isolating after one of his family members started showing symptoms.
Goodness me. Look, a little bit of good news though. The Queen's given health workers a message of support today.
She has, Michael. It happens to be World Health Day, so the Queen has released a statement writing, in testing times we often observe that the best of human spirit comes to the fore. The dedication of service of countless nurses, midwives and other health workers in these most challenging of circumstances is an example to us all. She is being kept up to date about the PM's condition by Downing Street. When we hear the latest, it will only be because Her Majesty has been fully briefed. He is the Prime Minister, and this is all very public. There are so many cameras here today, but it's also an incredibly personal crisis. He is 55 years of age, Boris Johnson. He is a dad, and he is also a father-to-be who now hasn't seen his pregnant fiancée for almost a fortnight since he was diagnosed. So an incredibly concerning time for all involved. Michael?
It is indeed. All right, Sarah Greenhalgh in London. Thank you.
In other news, a Queensland wildlife ranger who died after being attacked by a shark has been identified as 23-year-old Zachary Robber. He was swimming with a group of colleagues off the coast of Northwest Island yesterday when he was bitten by the shark on his leg and arm. It is the third shark attack in the area since December.
Toyota's recalled 45,000 cars over fears the vehicles might suddenly stall. The concerns relate to a problem with the fuel pump on 7 models, which were sold nationally after October 2013. The vehicles affected are the Kluger, the Hilux, Camry, Corolla, Land Cruiser, Prado and the FJ Cruiser.
And the body of Robert F. Kennedy's granddaughter has been found 4 days after going missing. Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean and her 8-year-old son Gideon were washed away while canoeing in Chesapeake Bay. Maryland authorities said the search for the young boy will continue tomorrow.
Still to come, your devices, your furniture, even your rent, the surprising costs you can claim in your tax return if you're working from home.
We check out the most watched online clips inspired by the COVID crisis.
And puzzles, they're now a hot commodity. Find out which other products are becoming boom products thanks to the coronavirus. It's all coming up next on the latest from 7 News.
With an increasing number of industries encouraging their employees to stay home and stay safe, more people than ever are working 9 to 5 without leaving the house. But is it possible to make working from home work for you? The ATO is set to offer further tax cuts and deductions in a bid to ease the pressure. So let's bring in H&R Block's Director of Tax Communication, Mark Chapman. Mark, good evening. More people working from home because of the coronavirus. So what is defined as a home office tax deduction?
So the things you can claim are basically all of those extra running costs that you're going to be incurring through working from home that you weren't previously incurring when you were working in the office. So, you know, a fraction of your heating bills, your electricity, your gas, your water, the costs of cleaning your home office area, and also, you know, if you've been out and bought any furniture or new IT equipment to use in your home office, you can potentially claim those as well, either straight away or over a period of years, depending on how expensive it was. And as well as things like mobile phone expenses, your home internet, your home phone. So lots of things can potentially be claimed.
All right. What about rent or mortgage?
Unfortunately not. Those are the two big ones that a lot of people would like to claim. If you're running a business from home, you can potentially claim those. But if you're just working from home, if your job has put you at home because of the coronavirus, unfortunately you can't claim those. If you're not sure what you can claim, the best thing to do is to get some advice from a tax professional like H&R Block.
Okay. The government also announced early access to our superannuation. What advice do you have for people who might be looking to do that?
Well, if you want to do that, you need to do that through the ATO. So there's no point ringing your superannuation fund. A lot of people have been doing that. These things need to be done through the MyGov website, through the ATO. You can't do it yet either. They're not going to be taking any applications until April the 20th. So you can register your interest on the MyGov website. So go onto that site. Register that you're interested. Several 100,000 people have already done that. And then from April the 20th, the ATO will be taking applications which will then enable those funds to flow out to people.
Okay. Mark, just a couple of quick practical tips for people who are experiencing financial hardship right now.
Oh, look, make sure that you're getting everything that you're entitled to. So if you've lost your job, maybe speak to your former employer to see whether you can be rehired and might be eligible for the JobKeeper payments, which are $1,500 a fortnight. If your business has got into trouble, if you're self-employed or a sole trader, again, you might be eligible for the $1,500 a fortnight JobKeeper payment. And if you're on a temporary visa, you might also be eligible to take out your superannuation tax-free, which unfortunately is about the only thing you will be eligible for if you're a temporary visa holder. So make sure you're claiming everything you're entitled to.
Right. Good to know there's lots of people we can ask for assistance. Everybody can. Mark Chapman, thanks very much.
Still to come, the amazing videos going viral during the coronavirus. They're good.
And tracky pants sales are soaring. Find out which other products are in high demand. That is next on the latest from 7 News. Now, we've been looking forward to this story about how COVID-19 is inspiring plenty of creativity. Angela Cox has been scanning social media for the most popular and imaginative online videos.
That's right, Mel. They make us feel good. They make us feel connected. And some of them just give us a good laugh. And don't we need that right now? Some of our favourites are the musical moments entertaining the world.
Don't let COVID virus spread. Isolate yourself at home. See your friends online instead. That's a healthy way to do.
The Sound of Music is just one of the classics inspiring housebound families. This is Les Mis with a twist.
One more day upon life. Do we get a change of clothes? Teachers fill up Google Classroom.
From one lounge room to 1,000. When a pub choir became a couch choir, everyone felt closer.
Just like me, they come to me, close to you, they want to be close. Why do stars fall down from the sky?
Stuck at home, celebrities have also been getting in on the act.
I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. So this butchering another song, just to encourage people to stay home and find something creative to do, even if it means ruining a Radiohead song. I love Radiohead so much.
And loving gummy bears led to this very sweet chorus.
One more time.
In these days indoors, the world is staying upbeat. Music is proving to be the universal language that not only unites, but entertains.
We need a vaccine as soon as can be, but until then this is perfect for me. Lazy long. Yikes.
Yeah, it's 2 metres away.
Oh, that is fantastic.
That's what boredom does, doesn't it?
So good. And if you're not following Sam Neill, do it. It's really good quality content.
He walks around the paddock and chats to his pig and has a lovely time. It's really good. That's great. Thank you.
That is what we need indeed. Well, from what we're watching to what we're buying, and our new COVID-19 shopping habits have provided a bit of a window into what we're doing with all that free time at home. Here's some interesting facts for you. Retailers, the ones that are open, report a 200% surge in beauty product sales. PJs and nightgowns are also hot buys. Sales are up between 100 and 400%. And as you can see, there's huge demand for tracky dacks and workout gear as well. Yeah. Vitamins also very popular online.
Topping the list, though, is toys, including board games and puzzles. And one big retailer reports that sales are up nearly 500%.
We cracked out Monopoly the other day.
Yeah.
It's still sitting on the table because you never get through it.
That is so good. We got out Trivial Pursuit and Mousetrap. I don't think we've had Mousetrap covered for like 10 years. Yeah. I did do some searching for trackies and slippers, like comfy stuff. But it's kind of fun.
It's Easter too. That usually happens around Easter time anyway. You get a bit comfy. It's starting to get cooler. It's nice. It's good to do. All right. Well, we have got weather
after this
and bits next. Welcome back. We're going to take a virtual trip to Zanzibar. You're looking at a shot there of Kuwangwa Beach, where it's a lovely warm 30 degrees, we're told, Mel. Let's have a look at the temperature around Australia now. Brisbane 27 and some possible showers. Cloud decreasing for Hobart. Darwin showers and a possible storm.
And in other parts of the country, Bundaberg, possible showers and 28, Lithgow foggy and 15, and in Wodonga, partly cloudy and 23 degrees. Now, due to popular demand, the final frame is back, and tonight we're sharing a few pictures from Australians making a fashion event out of taking out the bins.
It's one of the few reasons where you get to leave the house these days, so why not get dressed up?
I love this. It started with some neighbours in Queensland, and they made a Facebook page which has over 200,000 fans.
Turning trash into moments we can all treasure makes these our final frames, and deservedly so. They're good shots.
You've got to get dressed up.
Indeed. Thanks for your company this evening from the team here at 7 News. That is the latest. I'm Michael Usher.
And I'm Melissa Doyle. Good night.